My own mother abandoned me at the airport when I was only 15, so she could jet off on a lavish vacation with her new husband and his children. "You'll manage somehow," she said, and just turned away. I did, by phoning my estranged father, who arrived in a sleek private jet. When she returned, my room was empty and a legal notice was waiting for her. Can you even imagine? One minute, you're standing at an airport gate, a hopeful 15-year-old, and the next, your own mother turns her back, shrugs, and walks away with her new husband and his kids, leaving you completely alone with a measly $200. What the hell happened next, you ask? Well, that gut-wrenching betrayal, that absolute rock-bottom moment, was actually just the beginning of finding my real family and uncovering a truth so shocking it changed everything. Growing up, my earliest memories with my mom were actually pretty sweet. We didn't have much, but we had each other. I remember weekend trips to the park, her pushing me so high on the swings my stomach would flutter, and her baking a lopsided chocolate cake for my 6th birthday. It felt like enough, like we were a team against the world. Then, when I was 8, everything just shifted. I came home from school one day to find my parents sitting stiffly on opposite ends of our worn couch. The air in the room was so thick with tension I could practically taste it, a feeling I couldn't understand. They mumbled something vague about adults sometimes stopping loving each other, a generic explanation that left me heartbroken and utterly confused. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching my stuffed rabbit, the muffled sounds of their arguments a terrifying soundtrack through my bedroom wall. My mom got primary custody, and my dad, he slowly, painfully, faded from my life. Weekends turned into monthly visits, then just awkward phone calls. By the time I was 10, he was a name on my birth certificate, a ghost of a memory, someone I only vaguely remembered loving. Life in a single-parent household wasn't easy, not by a long shot. Mom worked 2 jobs, waitressing by day, cleaning offices by night. I got used to microwave dinners and letting myself into our apartment with a key around my neck. Despite the constant financial strain, there was a predictable rhythm to our lives, a certain stability. I knew I was her priority, the absolute center of her world. Or so I thought. When I was 13, our entire world completely changed again. My mom met Richard at the restaurant where she worked. He was a wealthy businessman, flashy and incredibly generous. I remember her cheeks flushing as she described his expensive suits and the way he looked at her like she was someone truly special. Their romance was a whirlwind, almost cinematic. Within 6 months, he'd proposed with a diamond ring that looked almost comically huge on her work-worn hand. Before I could even process having a stepfather, we were packing up our old life and moving into a sprawling suburban mansion. It had a pool, a home theater, more bathrooms than I could count. It was a dream house, the kind you only saw in movies. But it came with a ready-made family, Richard's 3 kids. Olivia, a year older than me, already had this permanent look of disdain that made me instantly feel inferior. Jackson, 12, was quiet and withdrawn, usually glued to his video games. Zoe, 10, was initially friendly, but that warmth quickly disappeared once we were all under the same roof. From day one, it was glaringly, painfully obvious that I didn't fit. Richard was polite, sure, but his genuine smiles and affection were clearly reserved for his own children. Family dinners became excruciating exercises in discomfort. My mom and Richard would discuss private schools, country club memberships, and exotic vacations, topics from a world I'd never been a part of. If I dared to speak about my public school or a book I was reading, I'd get polite nods before the conversation swung right back to the stepchildren's latest accomplishments in tennis, debate club, or piano recitals. It was like I was invisible, or worse, a reminder of a life they wanted to forget. But what truly tore me apart was watching my mom transform. The woman who once clipped coupons and haunted clearance racks now talked about designer brands and exclusive restaurants with casual ease. She colored her hair, whitened her teeth, and would laugh uncomfortably, calling our old life the struggle years whenever Richard's friends were around. It was like she was shedding her old skin, and with it, any part of herself that was connected to me. It felt like she was erasing our past, erasing me. I tried so, So hard to belong. I offered to help Olivia with her math, complimented Zoe's artwork, asked Jackson about his video games. My efforts were met with cool politeness at best, outright rejection at worst. The most painful memory was overhearing Olivia on the phone, her voice dripping with teenage superiority, telling her friends that her dad's new wife came with baggage and she meant me. The sting of that word, baggage, burrowed deep into my skin. As summer approached, Richard announced a family vacation to Bali. 2 weeks at an exclusive resort, private villas, personal butlers. The description was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. Despite the growing chasm between my mom and me, a surge of desperate hope bloomed in my chest. Maybe this trip, away from the daily pressures of home, was our chance to finally bond again, to reconnect. My hopes were crushed when my mom took only the stepchildren shopping for new vacation clothes. When I asked why, she casually said I had plenty already, even though most of mine were from our life before Richard, threadbare and outdated. I ended up spending my babysitting money on a modest blue one-piece that paled next to Olivia and Zoe's designer bikinis. The message was clear. I wasn't part of their luxury vacation. A week before the trip, I overheard a chilling conversation. My mom and Richard were in their bedroom, the door slightly ajar. "What about the arrangements for Blanche?" Richard asked. "All taken care of," my mom replied, her voice dismissive, making my stomach clench. "She won't be a problem." When I confronted her, heart pounding, she brushed it off. "Just trip details, honey. Nothing for you to worry about." But worry I did. That feeling of dread settled deep in my bones. The morning of our departure was a blur of chaos and excitement. Suitcases were loaded into Richard's luxury SUV. I noticed my passport wasn't with the stack of travel documents, but when I mentioned it, my mom just muttered something about having it in her purse and hurried me along. Looking back now, the signs were all there. The way she avoided eye contact in the car, how no one discussed my seat assignment, the fact my suitcase was mysteriously smaller than everyone else's. But at 15, desperate to believe I was part of this new family, I ignored every single warning bell. I wanted to believe. The international terminal was a maze of people, a cacophony of languages and emotions. Richard confidently led the way, my mom at his side, her designer bag clutched tight. Olivia, Jackson, and Zoe followed, faces bright with anticipation, practically skipping. I trailed behind, struggling with my small suitcase, feeling more like a shadow than a family member. At the check-in counter, Richard handed over passports. 5, not 6. A cold, hard knot twisted in my stomach. I watched, helpless, as boarding passes were distributed to everyone but me. "Excuse me," I said, stepping forward, my voice small. "I think you forgot my boarding pass." The airline attendant looked confused. "I only have 5 passengers listed." Richard cleared his throat, a sound of mild irritation. "Your mother needs to speak with you about that. We'll go ahead to security." As Richard and the stepchildren moved away with the luggage cart, my mother took my elbow and pulled me to a quiet corner near a gift shop. Her face wore an expression I'd never seen before, a strange mix of detachment and mild annoyance. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Listen, Blanche," she said, her voice unnaturally calm, almost robotic. "There's been a change of plans. You're not coming with us to Bali." The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. "What? Why? Did I do something wrong?" I stammered, my vision blurring. She sighed, glancing impatiently at Richard and the others, already waiting by security. "Richard thinks this should be a trip just for us and his kids. A chance to really bond as a family. But I am family too." I protested, my voice cracking, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm your daughter." "Don't make a scene," she hissed, digging into her purse. She pulled out a wad of cash and pressed it into my trembling hand. "Here's $200. You can figure it out. Just take an Uber home." I stared at the money, then at her, disbelief making my head spin. "You're leaving me at the airport alone? I don't even have a house key." She gave that casual shrug. That shrug. The one that would haunt my nightmares for years. "Mrs. Peterson next door has the spare. You'll be fine." You're mature for your age. Tears welled in my eyes as the full, horrifying reality crashed over me like a tidal wave. Mom, please. You can't do this. Richard is waiting, she said, glancing nervously towards security again. This vacation is important for our future, Blanche. Sometimes we all have to make sacrifices. A sacrifice would be giving up a concert ticket or postponing a shopping trip. I snapped, anger finally breaking through the shock, my voice raw. This is abandonment. She flinched, just for a second, but quickly composed herself. Don't be so dramatic. It's just 2 weeks. The refrigerator is stocked, and I left money for pizza. She leaned in, planted a quick, dry kiss on my forehead. I'll call you when we land. With that, she turned and walked away, her designer heels clicking on the airport tile as she rejoined Richard and the stepchildren. I stood there, stunned and silent, the $200 clutched in my trembling hand. She never once looked back. Olivia caught my eye briefly and smirked before they disappeared from view. The airport hummed with its normal rhythm. Travelers rushed. Families hugged. Announcements echoed. But for me, time had stopped. The tears came without warning, hot and fast, streaming down my face as I sank onto a nearby bench. A few passers-by gave me curious or concerned glances, but no one stopped. In an airport, a crying teenager was just another piece of the landscape, easily overlooked and quickly forgotten. That's how I felt, overlooked, forgotten, utterly alone. I spent the next hour in a daze, watching the departure board. Their flight status changed from boarding to departed. Each update was another twist of the knife in my heart. I tried calling my mother's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. My text showed as delivered but remained unanswered. Having fun at the airport? I finally texted, anger briefly eclipsing the hurt. Hope abandoning your child was worth the first-class upgrade. No response. By now, she was probably sipping champagne next to Richard, relieved to have shed the burden of her previous life, including me. As afternoon bled into evening, my situation grew increasingly precarious. An airport security officer approached me in the food court where I was nursing a soda I'd bought to justify my table. "Everything okay, miss?" he asked, a mix of suspicion and concern. "You've been here for several hours now." "I'm waiting for my ride," I lied, avoiding his eyes. "They got stuck in traffic." He seemed unconvinced, but moved on. A fresh wave of humiliation washed over me. How could I admit my own mother had abandoned me? The words were stuck, held back by shame and a lingering, foolish loyalty. The evening crowds thinned. The shops began closing. The reality was undeniable. $200 wouldn't last. Even if I got home, I'd be alone for 2 weeks with no transportation and limited funds. I found myself in the airport bathroom, splashing cold water on my swollen face, trying to formulate a plan. The girl in the mirror, red-rimmed and haunted, looked like a stranger. In that moment, I understood that something fundamental had changed. The invisible thread connecting me to my mother, the basic trust that she would always protect me, had been irreparably severed. 6 hours had passed since she walked away. My phone battery was critically low, adding another layer of anxiety. Around 8 p.m., I made my way to an open airport restaurant, ordering the cheapest item, a side of fries, to conserve my funds. The server, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Gloria, brought my food, then paused, studying my face. "You okay, honey?" she asked gently. "You look like you've been crying." I tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "I'm fine. Just a long day." She didn't press. A few minutes later, she returned with a chocolate milkshake I hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said with a wink. "Whatever's going on, sugar and chocolate never hurt." Her small kindness nearly undid me. I thanked her, my throat thick with emotion, and slowly ate while scrolling through my phone contacts. Anyone who might help. My list of options was depressingly short. Most friends from before the move had drifted away, and I hadn't made many new ones. I texted 2 of my mom's old friends. One didn't respond. The other replied, out of town. It seemed that when my mom moved on to her new life, Her old support network had been left behind as thoroughly as our small apartment. Then a name caught my eye. Dad. My heart skipped. I hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. Our last conversation was an awkward phone call on my 12th birthday. After that, he just vanished. My mom had always implied he wasn't interested, that he had a new family. Your father has moved on, she'd say, with a dismissive wave of her hand. Some men just aren't cut out for parenthood. I stared at his contact info, my thumb hovering. What if he rejected me too? What if my mom had been telling the truth? The thought of another abandonment felt unbearable. I went back to the airport bathroom, locking myself in a stall for privacy. I practiced what I'd say. Hi, Dad. It's Blanche. I know it's been a while. Too casual. Hello, this is Blanche. I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm in trouble. Better, but still not right. In the end, desperation won. With trembling fingers, I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to hang up when a deep voice answered, hello. The sound of his voice, so familiar yet strange, momentarily stole my speech. Hello? Is anyone there? He asked again. Dad, I finally managed, my voice small and uncertain. There was a pause. Then, Blanche? Is that you? Sweetheart, the concern in his voice cracked something inside me. Dad, I need help, I said, and then the whole story came pouring out in a rush of words, punctuated by sobs. The remarriage, the move. The airport, the $200. By the end, I was barely coherent. She left you alone at the airport? His voice had changed, a hard edge replacing the initial shock. Where are you now? Which airport? I told him, half expecting him to offer to call social services or wire money. Stay exactly where you are, he said firmly. I'm coming to get you myself. It'll take me about 3 hours. Can you stay safe until then? You're coming here? I asked, disbelief evident. You don't have to do that. Maybe you could just help me get home. Blanche, he interrupted, his voice unwavering. I'm coming to get you. Find the customer service desk for the airline your mother was flying with. Tell them your situation. I'll call ahead and make sure they take care of you until I arrive. After he hung up, I sat in the stall for several minutes, trying to process it. My father, who I believed wanted nothing to do with me, was dropping everything to rescue me. It seemed too good to be true, and a lifetime of disappointments had taught me to be wary of hope. Nevertheless, I followed his instructions, approaching the customer service desk, my heart in my throat. To my surprise, the airline staff were immediately sympathetic. They escorted me to a private waiting area, brought me a sandwich and juice, and assured me they'd watch over me. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think, the manager told me quietly. Parents changing plans at the last minute, leaving kids to fend for themselves. The 3-hour wait felt both endless and surreal. I drifted between hope, fear, and utter exhaustion. What if he didn't show up? What if he did, but resented rescuing me? My mind wandered to the few memories I had of him, teaching me to ride a bike, his steady hand on the seat, reading bedtime stories in different voices, the Christmas morning he built me a dollhouse. If he loved me, why had he disappeared? Why hadn't he fought to see me? The questions swirled in my tired mind. Just as I was beginning to doze off, a voice came over the PA system. Attention, please. Will Blanche Williams please come to the information desk? Blanche Williams to the information desk, please. My heart leapt. I gathered my small suitcase and followed an airline employee through a series of corridors and security checkpoints into what looked like a private terminal. Your father has arranged for you to meet him here, the employee explained as we approached glass doors leading to the tarmac. That's when I saw it. A sleek private jet, stairs descending from its door. And walking down those stairs was a tall man in a business suit. His familiar profile made my breath catch. My father looked different. His dark hair was streaked with silver, and he carried himself with a new confidence. But his eyes, when they found mine, were exactly as I remembered, kind and crinkled at the corners. For a moment, we both froze, just taking each other in. Then he strode forward, closing the gap in seconds. He stopped just short of embracing me, uncertainty etched across his features. Blanche, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I can't believe it's really you. I didn't know what to say or do. Part of me wanted to throw myself into his arms like the little girl who used to greet him at the door. Another part, the wounded teenager who had felt abandoned by both parents, held back. He seemed to sense my hesitation. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "For everything. For not being there. For not fighting harder to stay in your life." Something in his sincerity broke through my defenses. The tears I thought were exhausted hours ago returned with new force. "She said you didn't want to see me anymore," I choked out, the words raw with years of pain. "That you had moved on." His face darkened. "That was never true. Not for a single day." He tentatively opened his arms, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I stepped into his embrace, letting out years of pent-up grief against his shoulder. We stood like that for several minutes, both overcome. When we finally separated, he kept one arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the waiting plane. "Let's get you out of here," he said gently. "We can talk properly once we're in the air." The interior of the private jet was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Plush leather seats, polished wood tables, soft lighting. A flight attendant greeted us warmly, offering me drinks and snacks. As we settled into seats facing each other, I couldn't help but stare at my father in wonder. "Is this your plane?" He smiled, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. "The company's, technically. I'm the CEO of Horizon Tech now." "CEO?" I echoed in disbelief. My mother had always described him as struggling financially, barely making child support payments. "It's been a successful few years," he said simply, then leaned forward, his expression serious. "Blanche, I need you to know something. I've been trying to contact you for years. Birthday cards, Christmas gifts, phone calls, all of it. When your mother remarried and moved, I lost track of you completely. I hired private investigators who couldn't find your new address. I filed motions with the court that were somehow lost or delayed." My mind reeled as the implications sank in. "She kept you away from me on purpose." He nodded, pain evident in his eyes. "I've been sending child support and additional money every month since the divorce." "Money you never saw, I take it." I thought of the second-hand clothes, the ramen noodle dinners, my mother's constant complaints about money. "We were always broke," I whispered. "She said you barely paid child support." My father opened his briefcase and removed a folder, handing it to me. Inside were copies of cashed checks, court documents, records of attempted communications, all neatly organized by date. The evidence of his efforts and my mother's deliberate deception was overwhelming. "I don't show you this to hurt you," he said gently. "But you deserve to know the truth." As the plane took off, carrying me away from the airport where my mother had abandoned me, I felt strangely weightless. It was as if I was shedding years of misunderstandings and manipulations with each passing mile. My father explained he lived in Seattle, running the tech company he'd helped found shortly after the divorce. What began as a small startup had grown into a major player. "I kept your room ready," he said, a touch of embarrassment coloring his voice, "all these years, just in case." The flight passed quickly as we began the delicate process of getting to know each other again. There were awkward pauses, moments of overwhelming emotion, but underneath it all was a current of genuine connection that felt both new and strangely familiar. When we landed, a car was waiting. We drove through upscale neighborhoods before turning onto a private drive that wound up a hillside. The house that came into view took my breath away. A modern structure of glass and stone perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. "Home sweet home," my father said, watching my reaction. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." A woman named Linda, his executive assistant, greeted us at the door. She'd helped prepare for my arrival. "I've set up the blue bedroom for Blanche," she told my father. Fresh towels in the en suite, kitchen stocked. "The security team has been updated to include her." My father thanked her, and she departed with a warm smile. He then gave me a tour each room more beautiful than the last. When we reached my bedroom, I stopped short, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. The room was painted a soft blue with large windows overlooking the water. A plush queen-sized bed, a desk, a bookshelf, a comfortable reading chair. But what truly caught my eye was the collection of items on the dresser. "Are those?" I couldn't complete the question. My father nodded, his expression tender. birthday and Christmas presents. Every year since I lost contact with you. I couldn't deliver them, but I couldn't bear not to buy them either. Arranged chronologically were gifts still in their original wrapping paper. Beside them sat a photo album labeled simply Blanche. With trembling hands, I opened it to find what few photos my father had collected of me growing up, school pictures, a newspaper clipping my mother must have sent of me receiving an academic award, a blurry photo of me leaving my old school. You really did try to stay in my life, I whispered, the reality finally sinking in, hot tears pricking my eyes. Every single day, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. And I'm not going anywhere now if you'll let me be your dad again. That first night, we shared a meal delivered from a local restaurant. Neither of us was ready to cook. The conversation flowed more easily as exhaustion lowered my guard and food restored my energy. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard, my thoughts and feelings given value and consideration. As I finally crawled into the impossibly soft bed, emotional and physical exhaustion took over. My last conscious thought was that perhaps being abandoned at the airport wasn't the ending I had feared, but rather the beginning I had always needed. I woke the next morning momentarily disoriented, the unfamiliar softness of the bed and the sound of waves confusing me. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. I sat up, taking in my new surroundings in the clear light of morning. The room was even more beautiful now, sunlight streaming through the windows. After showering in the en-suite bathroom, which featured a rainfall showerhead and more toiletries than I'd ever owned, I dressed in yesterday's clothes and ventured downstairs. I found my father in the kitchen attempting pancakes with limited success. "Good morning," he said, looking up with a sheepish smile at the misshapen pancake in the pan. I thought I'd make breakfast, but it seems my cooking skills haven't improved. A memory surfaced, Sunday mornings, his odd-shaped, sometimes burnt pancakes served with such pride I never complained. "I remember your pancakes," I said, sliding onto a stool. "You used to make smiley faces with chocolate chips." His face lit up. "You remember that? You were so young." "Some things stick with you," I replied, accepting the plate he offered. Despite their appearance, the pancakes tasted good, and the normalcy of sharing breakfast helped ease the lingering awkwardness between us. After we ate, my father gave me a proper tour of the house and grounds. The property was expansive, with manicured gardens leading down to a private beach access. Inside, there was a home gym, a theater room, and an office with views that would make concentration impossible for most. "I have some people I'd like you to meet today," he said as we returned to the living area, "if you feel up to it." An hour later, I sat across from Judith Bennett, a distinguished family law attorney. "What your mother did constitutes abandonment under the law," she explained, her tone professional but kind. "Leaving a minor without proper care arrangements is illegal. Additionally, there appears to be financial misconduct regarding the child support payments your father has been making." I shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want to get my mom in trouble." "You just want to be safe and secure," Judith finished for me. "I understand, but we need to establish legal protection for you, especially if you wish to remain with your father." My father, who had been quietly listening, leaned forward. "Blanche, the choice is ultimately yours, but I want you to know that I'm prepared to seek full custody if that's what you want." The idea was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Can I really choose?" "You are 15, Judith said. The court gives significant weight to the preferences of children your age, especially in cases involving abandonment or neglect." After the attorney left, my father showed me his office where he had meticulously documented every attempt to maintain contact, copies of court filings, records of unanswered calls to my mother, even emails to my old school that had apparently never reached me. "She threatened legal action if I tried to contact you directly," he explained, showing me a letter from my mother's attorney dated 3 years ago. "She claimed I was harassing her and causing you emotional distress." Each revelation was another piece of the puzzle, completing a picture of deliberate separation that made my heart ache. "Why would she do this? Just to keep you away from me?" My father paused. "I think it was more complicated. After the divorce, your mother struggled financially, which was partly my fault. I hadn't yet achieved success. I think when the company took off and my financial situation improved dramatically, it was easier for her to maintain the narrative that I was uninvolved than to explain why she had kept us apart. 2 days after my arrival, just as I was settling into a tentative routine with my father, my mother finally called. I stared at her name on my phone screen, a maelstrom of emotions rendering me temporarily paralyzed. "You don't have to answer," my father said gently. After 4 rings, the call went to voicemail. A minute later, a notification appeared. With trembling fingers, I pressed play and put the phone on speaker. "Blanche. Honey, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." My mother's voice emerged, falsely bright. "I thought you understood the plan was for you to stay home during our trip. Richard felt it would be good for you to have some independence, and I agreed. I didn't abandon you, sweetie." "That's such a harsh word. Call me back so we can clear this up. The resort Wi-Fi is spotty, but I'll try to check my messages. Love you." The blatant rewriting of reality made my stomach churn. There had been no plan, no discussion of independence. She had abandoned me without warning and was now trying to gaslight me into doubting my own experience. "Classic," my father muttered, shaking his head. "She hasn't changed at all." I decided not to return the call. Instead, with the support of Judith Bennett and my father, I made the decision to stay in Seattle permanently. The attorney began the process of filing for a change in custody, gathering evidence of my mother's abandonment and financial misconduct. With the immediate legal matters in motion, my father turned his attention to practical concerns. "You need clothes, school supplies, whatever personal items you want," he said. "We can go shopping today if you feel up to it." The shopping trip was surreal. Accustomed to thrift stores and clearance racks, I was overwhelmed by his insistence that I choose whatever I liked without checking price tags. By the end of the day, I had a new wardrobe, a laptop for schoolwork, and a phone with unlimited data, a sharp contrast to the restricted plan my mother had grudgingly provided. That evening, sitting on the deck overlooking the ocean, my father and I had our first truly deep conversation about the divorce and the years of separation. "Why did you and Mom split up?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since I was 8, finally finding voice. He was quiet for a long moment. "The simplest answer is that we wanted different things from life. Your mother wanted financial security and social status above all else. When my first business venture failed, she saw me as a disappointment rather than a partner facing temporary setbacks." "And you?" I prompted. "I wanted a true partnership, someone who would weather the storms with me, not abandon ship at the first sign of rough waters." He looked at me, his eyes sad. "I never wanted to leave you, Blanche. That was the hardest part. Your mother used her custody rights as a weapon, gradually restricting my access until I was effectively cut out of your life. As the days passed, we made plans for my future. My father contacted the best private school in Seattle, arranging for me to start when the fall semester began. A child psychologist was engaged to help me process the abandonment and years of manipulation. Slowly, I began to envision a life where I was valued and supported, rather than merely tolerated. 1 week after my arrival, my father and Judith Bennett suggested it was time to retrieve my belongings from my mother's house. With her still in Bali for another week, we had the perfect opportunity to enter the house legally, as I was still officially a resident, and collect my personal items without confrontation. "You don't have to come if it would be too difficult," my father assured me. "I can handle it with the legal team." But I knew this was something I needed to do myself, a necessary step in closing this painful chapter. "I want to go," I said firmly. "There are things there that matter to me." The decision made, we began planning the trip with military precision. Flights were booked, legal documents prepared, a moving company engaged. As the date approached, I found myself drafting and redrafting a letter to leave for my mother, trying to find words to express the depth of her betrayal and my decision to forge a new path. 3 days before my mother was scheduled to return from Bali, my father and I, accompanied by Judith Bennett and her assistant, arrived at the house I had shared with my mother and Richard's family. Using my key, I opened the front door to find the house exactly as it had been left, eerily silent and undisturbed. Walking into that space, as essentially a visitor, was a disorienting experience. Familiar surroundings suddenly felt foreign. The photographs on the walls, I noticed for the first time, featured primarily Richard and his children, with my mother occasionally included. There were almost no images of me, and none at all of me with my mother. "Where's your room?" my father asked quietly, his hand a reassuring presence on my shoulder. I led him upstairs to the smallest bedroom at the end of the hall, the one furthest from the master suite. Opening the door revealed my modest space, neat but impersonal, lacking the touches of indulgence visible in the stepchildren's rooms. "This was your room?" My father's voice held a note of disbelief as he took in the basic furnishings and lack of decorative elements. "It's fine," I said automatically, the defensive response ingrained after years of being told I should be grateful. His expression softened. "No, sweetheart. It is not fine. You deserved better." With the help of the movers, we began packing my belongings. Clothes went into wardrobe boxes, books and school supplies into smaller cartons. I was selective, leaving behind anything that had been gifts from my mother or Richard, taking only what truly belonged to me or held sentimental value. As I cleared my desk drawers, I found a box of keepsakes I had almost forgotten, pushed to the back of the bottom drawer. Inside were photos from before the divorce, a few birthday cards my father had sent in the early years, and a small teddy bear he had given me on my 5th birthday. "You kept these," he said, his voice thick with emotion as I showed him the mementos. "I never really believed she was telling the truth about you not caring," I admitted. "Not completely." In my closet, behind a row of shoes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold, a stack of envelopes bound with a rubber band, all addressed to me in my father's handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened the first one, a birthday card for my 13th birthday, containing a heartfelt message and a gift card that had never been used. One by one, I opened the envelopes, each containing evidence of my father's continued efforts to remain in my life. Cards for every birthday and Christmas, a letter explaining his new address and phone number when he moved to Seattle, photos of him at his company headquarters with a note saying he hoped I would visit someday. "She kept all of these from me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "All this time, I thought you had forgotten about me." My father pulled me into a tight embrace. "Never, not for a single day." As the movers continued their work, I wandered into my mother's home office, drawn by a need to understand why she had gone to such lengths to separate me from my father. Judith had advised that personal documents related to me were legally mine to take. So, I began searching through the filing cabinet. In a folder labeled Divorce, I found financial records confirming what my father had told me, monthly child support payments far larger than what my mother had claimed to receive, regularly deposited into an account I had never known existed. There were also court documents showing my father's repeated petitions for visitation, all opposed by my mother with various fabricated excuses. Most damning of all was a draft of a letter to her attorney dated around the time she met Richard, outlining a strategy to minimize the father's influence as she integrated into her new partner's life. I was referred to as a complication that needed to be managed carefully to ensure Richard's continued interest. By late afternoon, the packing was complete. As the movers loaded the last of the boxes, I sat at my now empty desk and wrote the letter I had been composing in my mind for days. "Dear Mom," it began. The formality of mother feeling too distant. The warmth of mommy impossibly out of reach. I poured out my feelings of betrayal, not just from the airport abandonment, but from years of being made to feel like an inconvenience. I explained that I had found the hidden letters and financial records, that I knew the truth about her systematic campaign to keep my father from me. "I am choosing to live with Dad now," I wrote near the end, "not as revenge, but because I deserve to be somewhere I am wanted and valued. I hope someday you will understand the damage your choices have caused, not just to me, but to yourself. Despite everything, I do not hate you, but I need to love myself enough to leave." I placed the letter on the stripped mattress of what had been my bed, the white paper stark against the bare blue sheet. As a final touch, I left the house key beside it, a symbolic relinquishment of my place in this household. Walking out of that house for the last time, I felt a complex mixture of grief, relief, and resolution. My father waited by the car, his expression concerned. All done, he asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He seemed to understand, opening the car door for me without further questions. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the house. Instead, I looked forward, toward the future I was now free to create. My mother returned from Bali 3 days later. Within hours, my phone exploded with notifications, a barrage of increasingly frantic messages. Where are you? Why is your room empty? Call me immediately. Blanche, this is not funny. Come home right now. I just spoke to your father's lawyer. How could you do this to me after everything I have done for you? Please come home, sweetie. We can work this out. I miss you. The messages cycled through anger, manipulation, and false contrition in a predictable pattern. I showed them to my father and Judith, who advised me not to respond until the legal proceedings were further along. A week after her return, my mother showed up unannounced at my father's house, having somehow obtained the address. The security system alerted us to her presence at the gate, her luxury SUV visible on the monitor as she repeatedly pressed the intercom. You don't have to see her, my father assured me. We can have security turn her away. But I knew this confrontation was inevitable and perhaps necessary. I'll talk to her, I said. But I want you and Judith there, too. My mother's face when the front door opened was a study in conflicting emotions. Relief at finding me battling with outrage at the situation. She wore an expensive sundress and designer sunglasses pushed up into her perfectly highlighted hair, the picture of affluent suburbia. Blanche. Thank God, she exclaimed, stepping forward as if to embrace me. I took an instinctive step back, and her arms dropped to her sides. What is going on? Why did you leave? Why are you with him? The last word was infused with such venom that I flinched. Perhaps we should continue this conversation inside, my father suggested, his voice calm but firm. Once seated in the living room with Judith present as both legal counsel and witness, my mother's facade began to crack. Her eyes darted around the beautiful space, taking in the obvious wealth and taste evident in every detail. So this is what this is about, she said with a brittle laugh. He has lured you away with promises of luxury. I should have known. That is not why I am here, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. I am here because you abandoned me at an airport. I am here because you have been lying to me about Dad for years. I am here because I found all the letters and cards you hid from me. Her expression faltered, then hardened. You went through my private things. How dare you? They were addressed to me, I countered. They were mine to read. You're 15 years old, she snapped. Everything under my roof belongs to me, including your correspondence. I was protecting you from his inconsistency, his broken promises. My father, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. There were no broken promises, Karen. Only your systematic efforts to erase me from our daughter's life. You have no right to judge me, she hissed. You have no idea what it was like raising her alone while you were off becoming a millionaire. I sent child support every month, he replied evenly. Far more than the court ordered. Money you apparently spent on yourself while telling Blanche you were struggling. My mother's face flushed. That is a lie. I sacrificed everything for her, including abandoning her at an airport so you could vacation with your new family, Judith interjected, her professional tone making the accusation even more damning. For a moment, my mother seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed as she turned back to me. I didn't abandon you. I gave you an opportunity for independence. If you had just gone home as instructed, none of this drama would have been necessary. The blatant rewriting of reality made my chest tight with anger. You left me alone at an international airport with $200 and no house key. You didn't tell me to go home until you were walking away. You didn't answer my calls or texts. How is that an opportunity? You are twisting what happened, she insisted, though her voice had lost some of its conviction. My father leaned forward. Karen, we have security footage from the airport. We have witness statements from airline staff, and we have the text messages you sent Blanche after the fact trying to cover your tracks. The color drained from my mother's face. You're building a case against me. You want to take my daughter and throw me in jail, too, after everything we meant to each other. This is not about punishment, Judith explained. This is about establishing what is in Blanche's best interests going forward. She has expressed a clear desire to live with her father, and given the circumstances, the court is highly likely to honor that wish. My mother's composure crumbled entirely, tears streaming down her face as she turned to me. Blanche, please. I made a mistake. I was wrong. But you cannot leave me for him. We are a family. We stopped being a family when you decided Richard and his children were more important than me, I said quietly. Maybe even before that, when you started lying about Dad. It wasn't like that, she protested weakly. Then what was it like? I asked. Help me understand why you would hide Dad's letters, lie about child support, and then abandon me for a vacation. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, apparently unable to formulate a justification even she could believe. Finally, she whispered, Richard thought it would be better if you stayed home. He said the resort was really for adults and his children who were used to that lifestyle. I was afraid of losing him. The raw honesty was somehow more painful than her earlier attempts at manipulation. So, you chose him over me. I chose financial security, she countered. Do you have any idea what it is like to be a single mother with no money? Richard offered us a better life. He offered you a better life, I corrected. I was just excess baggage. Before she could respond, the front door opened, and Richard himself strode in, his face tight with anger. Karen, this has gone on long enough. Get in the car now. My father stood immediately. How did you get past security? Richard ignored him, focusing on my mother. I told you not to come here. You're just making things worse. Our lawyer said not to have any contact. My mother seemed to shrink under his gaze, her brief moment of honesty evaporating as she reverted to the compliant wife. I just wanted to see Blanche. And now you have, he said dismissively. Let's go. As my mother rose to follow him, I called after her. Is this really what you want, Mom? Someone who treats you like a child and me like an inconvenience. She paused, conflict evident in her expression, but Richard took her elbow firmly. The car, Karen. Now. The last image I had of my mother that day was her back as she walked away, just as it had been at the airport. But this time, I was not the one being left behind. In the aftermath of that confrontation, my father's legal team filed for a restraining order after Richard attempted to enter the property again the following day. The court granted the order and a temporary custody arrangement was put in place pending a full hearing. The hardest part was accepting that my mother had chosen her new life over me. Not just once at the airport, but repeatedly over the years with each hidden letter and each lie about my father. The girl who had once believed she was the center of her mother's world had to confront the painful reality that she had been, at best, an afterthought. The months following my mother's dramatic visit were challenging but transformative. Adjusting to life with my father involved creating new routines, establishing boundaries, and learning to trust that his presence in my life was permanent. I began seeing Dr. Eleanor Wilson, a therapist specializing in adolescent trauma and parental abandonment. Our weekly sessions provided a safe space to process the complex emotions surrounding my mother's betrayal and the years of manipulation. What you are feeling is entirely normal, Dr. Wilson assured me during one particularly difficult session. Anger, grief, relief, guilt, they can all coexist. Healing is not linear. With her guidance, I began to understand that my mother's actions reflected her own brokenness rather than my worth. This realization didn't excuse what she had done, but it helped me carry the burden with less self-blame. People who are whole don't abandon their children, Dr. Wilson explained. Your mother's choices speak to her limitations, not yours. My father enrolled me in Westlake Academy, one of Seattle's premier private schools, for my sophomore year. The transition was both exciting and intimidating. After years of being the outsider in Richard's home, I was wary of forming new connections. But to my surprise, I found myself making genuine friends for the first time in years. Zoe and Aiden, twins who shared my love of literature, adopted me into their friend group with an ease that felt almost suspicious at first. Haley, a gifted artist who recognized my tentative attempts at sketching, offered to teach me proper techniques during lunch periods. Slowly, I began to lower my defenses, allowing these new friends glimpses of my true self. You're different from when you first came here, Zoe commented one afternoon as we walked home from school. Less guarded. I guess I'm learning that not everyone has an agenda, I replied, the insight surprising even me. Building a relationship with my father was a delicate dance of rediscovery. We were simultaneously getting to know each other as we were now and reconciling memories of who we had been. Sometimes the past and present aligned perfectly, like when he remembered my childhood love of stargazing and installed a telescope on the deck. Other times, the years of separation created unexpected gaps, moments of disconnect that reminded us of all we had missed. I wish I had been there for your first day of middle school, he said one evening as we looked through photos I had brought from my mother's house. Your science fair projects, your first crush. We cannot get those years back, I told him, surprising myself with the role reversal, me comforting him. But we have now and the future. He squeezed my hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. When did you get so wise? Trauma has its benefits, I joked, the dark humor a sign of my gradual healing. 6 months after I moved in with my father, the court granted him full legal custody. My mother, represented by an expensive attorney Richard had hired, fought the decision initially, but eventually agreed to the arrangement after Judith presented the overwhelming evidence of abandonment and financial misconduct. The judge ordered my mother to repay the misappropriated child support funds and established a structured visitation schedule that would begin only after I completed a certain number of joint therapy sessions with her. It was more consideration than she deserved in my opinion, but my father gently reminded me that maintaining some relationship with her might be important to my long-term emotional health. You can be angry with her, even hate what she did, without severing the connection completely, he advised. But the choice is ultimately yours. I will support whatever you decide. I agreed to the joint therapy, though the first few sessions were excruciating. My mother vacillated between tearful apologies and subtle attempts to justify her actions. Her narrative had shifted from denying abandonment to framing it as a misguided attempt to please Richard, as if that somehow made it less damaging. I just wanted us to have security, she repeated often. So you made sure I ended up alone at an airport instead, I responded during one particularly tense session. Over time, I established firm boundaries with my mother. I would not return to live with her regardless of promises or emotional appeals. I would not pretend the past had not happened. I would not allow her to rewrite our history to ease her guilt. These terms were non-negotiable, and slowly she seemed to accept them. My father remained remarkably neutral throughout this process, never speaking ill of my mother despite everything she had done. When I asked him about this restraint, his answer stayed with me. Hating her would only hurt you, he explained. You're half her, whether we like it or not. Besides, she gave me you. And for that, I can forgive almost anything. The first holiday season with my father and his extended family, grandparents and cousins I barely remembered, was a revelation. The genuine warmth and inclusion I experienced stood in stark contrast to the performative family dinners at Richard's house, where I had always felt like an unwelcome guest. My paternal grandmother, a vibrant woman in her 70s, pulled me aside during Christmas dinner. You have your father's resilience, she told me, her eyes crinkling with affection, and his heart. But that spark, that fire when you talk about things that matter to you, that is all your own. High school graduation came 3 years later, my father beaming with pride as I delivered the valedictorian address. My mother attended, sitting awkwardly in the row behind my father and his parents. Our relationship had evolved into something cordial, if not close, built on careful honesty rather than the false harmony she would have preferred. College took me to the East Coast, where I pursued a degree in psychology with a minor in family law. The distance from both parents allowed me to define myself beyond the dynamics of their divorce and the drama of my teenage years. I discovered passions and strengths I might never have recognized had my life continued on its previous path. In my junior year, I interned with a nonprofit organization supporting children of divorce, using my experience to help others navigate similar challenges. This work eventually led to my career path, developing programs for family courts to better consider children's needs during custody proceedings. The journey toward forgiveness was long and nonlinear. Some days, The memory of my mother's casual shrug as she abandoned me at the airport still had the power to steal my breath. Other days, I could acknowledge her humanity, her flaws, and her limited capacity with compassion rather than bitterness. Forgiveness does not mean what happened was okay, my therapist had explained years earlier. It means you are choosing not to let it consume your future. On my 20th birthday, I wrote my mother a letter expressing this hard-won understanding. I have learned that people can only give what they have within themselves to give, I wrote. Your capacity for unconditional love was damaged long before I came along. Recognizing this has freed me from expecting what you could never provide. Her response was surprisingly self-aware. You deserved better than what I could be as a mother, she wrote back. I am sorry for that every day. When I married at 28, my father walked me down the aisle with tears in his eyes. From the moment you called me from that airport, all I wanted was to see you happy and whole, he whispered before giving my hand to my soon-to-be husband. Look at you now. My mother attended the wedding with her new partner, Richard, long gone after their eventual divorce. She participated appropriately, but without attempting to claim credit for the woman I had become, a restraint that reflected her own growth over the years. As I built my own family, I carried forward the lessons from both parents, a roadmap of what to emulate and what to avoid. From my father, I learned the patient persistence of true love and the courage to begin again after loss. From my mother, I learned the importance of self-sufficiency and the danger of placing status above authentic connection. The airport abandonment, which once defined me, gradually became just one chapter in a much longer story. A pivotal moment, certainly, but not the conclusion. In an unexpected way, being left behind had propelled me forward, forcing me to discover strengths I might otherwise never have recognized. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my mother had taken me to Bali that day. If she had chosen me over Richard's preferences, would I still be caught in the cycle of seeking her conditional approval? Would I have discovered my father's unwavering love? Would I have found my voice and purpose? These questions have no answers, of course. Life offers no parallel versions to compare with the path we actually walk. All I know with certainty is that families are defined not by biology or legal documents, but by the consistent choice to show up, to value, to prioritize one another. My father taught me that. My mother, in her absence, confirmed it. If you have ever felt abandoned or betrayed by someone who should have protected you, know that your worth was never determined by their failure. Their limitations are not your destiny. Family can be found and created in unexpected places if you remain open to connection, even after heartbreak. What about you? Have you ever had to choose your own path when someone let you down? Tell me what you think in the comments. I really want to know.